And so, if you probably haven't noticed, many of you probably have, we're in the middle of a political rebellion in America. I get to my district in Ohio several times a month. I'll be going there, matter of fact, later on this morning. But I spend a lot of time traveling elsewhere in the country on behalf of my colleagues in our party. And I get a chance to talk to an awful lot of people. And I've never seen more people engaged in our government in my lifetime. And as a result, they're wondering, who are those legislators, who are those congressmen that are standing up for me? Who are the ones who are opposed to all of this big government spending? Who are the ones who are opposing all of these tax increases? And I can tell you that we're about to have one of the most rambunctious political careers that we've seen in over 50 years. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat, Republican, in the legislature or in Congress, the American people are coming after all of us. They've had enough. You know, I've seen anger amongst constituents and voters from time to time over this issue or that issue. But we're beyond anger over one particular issue or another. What we now see in the American people is fear. Fear that the country that they grew up in is not going to be the country that their kids and grandkids get to grow up in. And so Americans have taken to the streets. And when you see the people who actually show up at these tea parties, I've been to my share of them, you know, there's some Democrats there, there are some Republicans there, there are some anarchists there, I'm going to kill all of us. But you know, 75% of the people who show up at these events are people who've never been involved in the political process before. I doubt that some of them ever even voted. And as a result, there is a movement, there is a rebellion, and I think the American people are going to hold their elected officials accountable. And so in a time like this, I would suggest to all of you, it really is time to hunker down. It's time to fund the real basics of what the American people are demanding. It's time to cut the frivolous spending. I know there's a debate going on in the Ohio Senate right now over how to come up with an $851 million hole that exists in the fiscal year that ends in June. And, you know, the easiest thing to do is, well, there's a tax cut that was going to be phased in, and so we can just eliminate the last phase of that tax cut, and it'll avoid any possibility of having to cut more spending. But raising taxes, and that's exactly what it is, raising taxes in a recession is the wrong prescription. And especially in a state like Ohio, raising taxes on upper income people is going to push more people out of the state down to Florida, because if you have any money in Ohio, that's where everybody goes. They go down to Florida, where there is no state income tax. Raising taxes in the middle of a recession is going to hamper investment. And the fact is that we're going to have to cut more spending. I told you up front, this is not going to be easy. And this is not going to be over quickly. This is not a typical cyclical recession like we've seen in the past. And so it really is time to get our arms around it. And I would also just suggest to all of you, there are a lot of governors out there, both parties, who don't seem to get it. And when you look at their health care bill, they want to saddle the states with more Medicaid funding. And they're promising to pay for most of it. Well, you've heard those promises before. And at a time when states are already grappling with difficult state budgets, this is not the time to put even more mandates on states. And so I would urge all of you to push your governors, Democrat and Republican, to come out in opposition to these policies here in Washington. We need all the voices that we can get to put a stop to these crazy policies. And I know some of you may not have been around a while. Some of you have been around probably too long. But you know, listen, when the American people speak, Washington listens. I've seen it happen dozens of times during my political career. I can remember when I was a freshman member of Congress, and I was reading USA Today, the big sleuth that I am, and I saw this little article in USA Today about the General Accounting Office doing its annual audit of the House Bank. And this came out in September of 1991. It was the 1990 audit of the House Bank where they found that members of Congress had bounced 8,226 checks at the House bank. Well, I had an account at the House bank because they told me it was the only way I could get paid. I found out why later. They needed my money in there to create a little more cash flow. But some of us started to ask some questions. And, when you ask somebody a question and they start to turn white, I spent a little time around a bar. I can sniff out fear pretty quickly. No one would tell us anything. So about a week later, we're going to bring a privileged resolution to the floor of the House for force them to disclose what was going on in the House bank. And before they would recognize us, the Speaker of the House came down to the well. Dick Gephardt, who was the majority leader, came down to the well of the House. Even the Republican leader came to the well of the House. And all three of them essentially said the same thing. We didn't do anything wrong, and we won't do it again. Well, I was outraged. And so it turned out to be 7 of us, 7 freshman Republicans in the minority. We had about as much clout as the lint that you have on your suit from sitting at that table. We were trying to figure out what we could do to stop this. And we knew we couldn't get anywhere inside the Congress, and we decided, foolishly, why don't we take our case to the American people? And over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, we did every radio show, TV program, interview with print reporters that we could, and 5 days later, the House bank was closed. Why? Not because of 7 freshman legislators in the minority, because the American people demanded it. And 6 months later, they were going to blame all of this on the top 24 check bouncers, even though some 350 members have been involved in it. And we said, no, the American people have a right to know what goes on in their Congress. And we need to lay all of the information out there. And they just dared us. Now, by this point, we realized that our careers were over. If we didn't win, we were never going to get a committee assignment. We were finished. And so we had nothing to lose, and we had to win. And so we took our case back to the American people once again. And 4 days later, everything about the House bank was laid out in front of the American people. When you watch this debate over health care that's gone on, the longer it's gone on, the more people have learned about this bill, and the less number of people are supporting it. And the support for this bill now is somewhere down in the 30s, while the opposition to this government takeover of our health care system, the opposition now is in the mid to upper 50s. And so my point here is very simple. The American people are engaged. The American people are speaking loud and clear. And all of us as legislators, both whether we're at the local level, the state level, here at the national level, we as legislators, our job is to listen. And we really do need to listen.